write in on my phone here to get our newsletter. And our speaker this morning, J.D. Mitchell, is a retired registered professional engineer. J.D. has a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Washington. He has also completed his Master of Biblical Studies in Biblical Creation Apologetics from Master's Graduate School of Divinity. J.D. was Executive Director of the Institute for Creation Science that met monthly in Portland from 2005 through 2018. He does science research, he writes and speaks regarding the creation versus evolution controversy as a part of his creation science ministry, Creation Engineering Concepts. J.D. is treasurer of Design Science Association here and is a member of the Creation Research Society. J.D. has been studying the scientific and biblical evidence regarding the origins controversy since 1984, when he was converted from being a theistic evolutionist to a born-again Christian. His free monthly email newsletter, CEC News, is designed to keep subscribers up to date on the latest news and articles regarding biblical creation apologetics, and his ministry with his wife Bonnie assists him in this ministry. J.D., thank you for informing us about Leviathan.
Well, as I look out in this audience, I appreciate every one of you who's decided to come during this busy time of year. We had hoped that we might get some youngsters to come, but I'm not seeing too many. I see one back there. Or are there two? How many? We were going to bribe, figuring that bribery would work to get the kids here. So I don't know how many of you read the newsletter that said that we were going to have models of Leviathan, and we were going to have books about Leviathan available for free. All you had to do was sit through my talk, and then you got one. So you kids, when my talk's over, be sure you come up and get your free stuff. And if you see any other youngsters come in, make sure you let them know that we do have the book or the model of Leviathan available for them. So the first thing I always like to do when I'm taught, here comes some more youngsters over here. Good, great. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is to explain the importance of having understanding about presuppositions. So can we get my talk up on the screen now? There we go. Okay. In my talks, I always presuppose that God cannot lie and that the Bible, history, and science are inerrant and accurate. As you probably already know, most secular scientists assume that the Bible is not true, that it is just another book. A primary difference between the biblical and anti-biblical views are seen in their understanding of death. So we look here at this slide up here, and according to evolution, death, suffering, disease, and bloodshed are good things. They're what have brought about the existence of mankind, and that this is a long process, millions and millions or billions of years. Whereas according to the biblical understanding, in the beginning everything was good. It was man's actions that brought sin into the world, and from sin we got death. And in fact, all deep time, by deep time I mean millions of years, theories, whether they're secular or religious, place death before sin. And that's a critical error that undermines the truth of their various paradigms. So whenever you look at someone's understanding of the origins, if you see that they have this idea of millions of years of development over a long period of time, you can know that their idea is wrong, because that is not the truth. Okay, so here are listed some of the suggestions for what Leviathan of the Bible could be that we're going to look at today. The question is, was Leviathan a land animal like a dinosaur? Was it a whale? Was it a sea monster, a marine reptile, a sea dragon, maybe a giant crocodile? Now, while the word Leviathan is found in a few other places in the Bible in a metaphorical way, the primary sources of information about it as a real animal come from Job chapter 41 and Psalm 104. And Job, God provides us with 34 verses with over 500 English words. When we translate it from the original language, there are about 500 English words that describe Leviathan. And then there are 3 more verses and another 50 words of description in Psalm 104. So that's a total of 37 descriptive verses. So those of you who are wanting to enter in with a talk takeaways, this is the answer to your first question. You fill in the blank with 37 descriptive verses. Now I've used these English translations to summarize what God tells us about Leviathan. The King James Version, the New International Version, the Revised Standard Version, and the English Standard Version. And now we're going to go through my summary of what my understanding of those translations tell us about Leviathan. Number 1, Leviathan prefers the water but can also survive on land. And in these parentheses, you'll see all the verses where we learn that information. Number 2, Leviathan has a large tongue. There's just one verse that talks about that. Number 3, Leviathan is too ferocious for men to get near and cannot be controlled by men. Many verses that make that point. Number 4, Leviathan has a 2-nostril nose and jaws. A couple of verses about that. Number 5, Leviathan has a tough hide and skull that is resistant to harpoons, darts, javelins, arrows, clubs, and spears. About half a dozen verses there. Leviathan has unusually strong scales that are close-knit. Verses 15, 16, 17, and 23 of Job 41. Leviathan has a very hard chest and has a jagged underside that leaves distinctive marks as it moves through the mud. Number 8, Leviathan has at least 2 limbs, according to verse 12. Number 9, Leviathan is absolutely strong as well as graceful. A couple of verses. Number 10, Leviathan has a large mouth filled with fearsome teeth. Verse 14. Leviathan's snorting throws out flashes of light, sparks of fire, and smoke. Verses 18 and 20. Number 12, Leviathan's mouth shoots out fire, according to verses 19 and 21. Number 13, Leviathan can rise up, and when he does, men are terrified. Number 14, Leviathan can only be controlled by his creator, and Leviathan was created to remind men of God's sovereignty and to humble them before his creation. 4 verses there. And then we move to Psalm 104, verse 26, where we read, Leviathan can frolic in the vast and spacious sea where ships go to and fro. I think that Leviathan, from our understanding of reading God's Word, we can believe that Leviathan was a real creature and not a mythical creature. And here's why I believe this to be true. Number 1, the book of Job consists of loads of scientific facts about the creation. Number 2, God begins speaking to Job in chapter 38. In chapters 38 and 39, God mentions over a dozen real animals, most of which are extant. They exist today. Mythical animals are not mentioned at all. Point number 3, God could not make his point to Job if he began speaking of mythical animals in chapters 40 and 41. Remember that God is not answering Job's question at all, but rather is exalting his creation and his total sovereignty over his creation, including even Behemoth and Leviathan. If Behemoth or Leviathan were mythical or symbolic, Job would have been justified to say to God, so what's your point? What are you trying to tell me? So from the rock record, we have evidence regarding land animals. The reason why Leviathan cannot be a tyrant bipedal or a duck-billed dinosaur is because of evidence indicates these animals were terrestrial. They could not live in the sea, as we're told Leviathan could, nor did these animals leave distinctive marks in the mud as they moved through it. They left marks, but they were footprints, obvious footprints, and occasionally you'd see a tail print in the rock record. So is Leviathan a land animal like a dinosaur? I would say the answer is a definite no. So Tyrannosaurus and Parasaurolophus, as we see in this image here, are not candidates for Leviathan, as suggested by some creationists in years past. They're land animals and would not have been swimming in the ocean. Dr. Tim Clary from the Institute for Creation Research and some other creationists have suggested that the dinosaur Spinosaurus could be Leviathan. But I think not, because there is no evidence that it has scales, and we're going to talk about scales a lot later. It cannot be considered to have been seaworthy either, and the Bible provides us with no description of a giant sail on the back of Leviathan. If God wanted to describe Leviathan, I'm sure he would have brought up the fact about this giant sail on its back. And there's more. In 2022, Paul Sereno, a secular paleontologist, joined 8 other paleontologists to study Spinosaurus as to whether it could have been an aquatic dinosaur. Using the latest computer models, they determined that Spinosaurus was a bipedal dinosaur, was unstable in deep water, was a slow surface swimmer, and too buoyant to dive. They have a 44-page paper that you can find at elifesciences.org and dated the 30th of November 2022. They also proposed that new fossils showed that Spinosaurus ranged far inland and found that living reptiles with similar spine-supported sails over their trunk and tail are used for display rather than aquatic propulsion. So at least these experts certainly do not agree with Dr. Clary with regard to Spinosaurus as being a candidate for Leviathan. I also do not think that the description of a whale matches that of Leviathan. The largest whales are gargantuan and are the largest animals that have ever lived that we are aware of, but they do not have scales and are comfortable only in the deep sea. While many whale types do have teeth, the largest whales do not, and have baleen structures in their mouths to capture their food. So we now know land animal no, whale no. Let's talk about some very large animals now and that are living. Some as long as or longer than a school bus. The average school bus is about 35 feet long. Some of you, if you watched, as you looked when you came in the room, you'll see that there's 4 cones running across the front of the room. There's one over on this end of the room. And there's another cone 25 feet from there. And then there's one that's 35 feet from there. And then this cone right here is 50 feet from there. That cone over there at the other end is 90 feet. Now the largest whale is the blue whale, and it's been measured to be 100 feet or more. That means that a blue whale would run from the wall all the way to another 10 feet outside of that wall. As we talk about some of these the characteristics and sizes of some of these animals that are alive today and that we find in the rock record as fossils, I'll be talking to you about how big they are, and so you'll be able to have this estimate by looking at how far apart these cones are. Here we see the largest known whale, which is, I mentioned, the blue whale, has been found up to 100 feet long. A long history of whale hunting by men indicates that man is not afraid of this animal, as God tells us he is of Leviathan. And whales cannot survive on land. So we now know that we are going to consider next what we're called sea monsters. And what I found in the literature is that sea monster equals marine reptile equals sea dragon equals sea serpent. When people are talking about these animals, oftentimes from stories that they've read in the past, we found that these four terms can be considered as equivalent. They usually mean about the same thing, so I'm going to treat them as being descriptive of the same sorts of life forms. Here are some examples of these sea monsters as described over the centuries. And what I want to make clear is that these sea creatures that are illustrated here were not just the figments of people's imaginations. These are things that were highly documented. People who got up close to them, and artists were able to make careful documentation and drawings of these animals. Some of them, we could say, look a lot like animals we found in the rock record as fossils. Others not so much. They could be just the result of animals that have gone extinct over the last hundreds of years. So these reports were carefully documented. They're not mythical. They're representations of real sea creatures. However, their descriptions do not, even though they're large, fearsome creatures, they do not generally match up to those of Leviathan found in God's Bible. Many reports that we find have all this documentation are from the 17th through the 19th centuries. Marine reptiles and other animals have been discovered as fossils in the rock record. Could any of them be Leviathan of the book of Job? Well, next I'm going to take a look at a number of these animals that were rapidly buried in the cataclysmic worldwide flood at the time of Noah. Did any of these survive the flood to be later described as Leviathan in the Bible? Well, we're going to spend quite a bit of time looking at that. We know that Noah did not take sea creatures on board the ark, and that many of these creatures survived the flood to allow their descendants to live yet today. Here's a depiction of a skeletal reconstruction of a plesiosaur that may have been over 50 feet long. So that means this animal could have grown from this wall over here all the way to 50 feet, which is over here to this side. That's how long fossil evidence shows that animal grew to be. That's called the plesiosaur. Now, the plesiosaur teeth came in varying sizes, from small to quite large, depending on the size of the animal, but they were all very sharp. Plesiosaur teeth were indeed fearsome, but little else in their description matches that of Leviathan. Leviathan had sharp teeth, but that's about the only thing the plesiosaur matches up in the description. How about the ichthyosaurs? They are thought to have been strong swimmers. They could have fit the bill of a graceful mover. They often had huge eyes and sharp teeth. And this illustration reminds us that fossil finds illustrate they gave live birth to their young. And if you go to the Mount St. Helens Creation Center, the Dinosaur and Fossil Museum there, you'll see displays that show evidence of not only of the bones of an ichthyosaur, but bones of ichthyosaurs having birth and being captured at the instant of birth. So you see a baby ichthyosaur coming out of the mother, and that's captured. Only one way that could happen would be rapidly buried by a giant catastrophe such as a worldwide flood. The evidence in the rock record indicates that some ichthyosaurs, such as the Spinosaurus seen here, could have been as large as 50 feet long from that wall over to this cone here. Here is shown a skeletal reconstruction of a 50-foot long Spinosaurus. Yes, ichthyosaurs meet some of God's description for Leviathan, but not many. They definitely would not have been at home on land. They are not good candidates for Leviathan. Let's move on to the next kind of marine reptile, which are the plesiosaurs. They are categorized by some experts as relatives of the plesiosaurs. So we're talking about plesiosaurs versus plesiosaur, but generally have short, powerful necks and massive teeth, their massive teeth-filled jaws. The genus name for this 20-foot long monster is Romaleosaurus. So 20 feet would be from there to this, about the first cone there. Cronosaurus is another plesiosaur and may have been the most formidable of the plesiosaurs. And at one time, scientists described Cronosaurus as having been up to 50 feet long, which would have been from the wall over to this cone. That has been pared back to just 33 feet, as shown in this skeletal reconstruction here. Oftentimes, the bones that are first found are incomplete, and people make a lot of assumptions about the rest of the skeleton, and they can be way off as to how large the animal really is. In Ken Ham's 1998 book, The Great Dinosaur Mystery Solved, Leviathan was identified as being Kronosaurus. This is the illustration used in that book by Ken Ham, and he entitled this illustration as Leviathan. You can see the fire shooting out of its mouth. Note also that Kronosaurus is depicted here with scale-covered body. There's actually in the paleontological record no evidence for either the scales on Kronosaurus or for there being any way that it could have shot fire out of its mouth. Now, plesiosaur Kronosaurus may have been shortened back to only 33 feet long, but plesiosaur lepurodon is thought to have been at least 50 feet long. And so here in this illustration, we see the Pleurodon skeleton reconstruction as being 65 feet long. What an impressive animal that would be. That'd be 15 feet further on past this 50-foot cone here. Next, we move to the mosasaurs. These animals are formidable with teeth-filled jaws. The mosasaurs are always depicted in the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies as top of the food line in the water. This is the genus species Mosasaurus hoffmanni, shown here. And here's an idea of what Tylosaurus proliger looked like in the flesh, another mosasaur. This monster was up to 50 feet long, had huge jaws with heavy, sharp, cone-like teeth and paddle-like fore and hind limbs. Here's a skeletal reconstruction of Tylosaurus in the Houston Museum showing its teeth and massive jaws. And this is just a 29-foot Mosasaurus conodon at the South Dakota Museum of Geology. While the various plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and mosasaurs have shown you can certainly be described as sea monsters or sea dragons, they're all designed to be confined to the sea, and therefore cannot be the Leviathan that is described in the Bible that left marks on land. Another sea monster from the fossil record is Dunkleosteus. This placoderm would not venture out on the land either and did not even have teeth. It had two razor-sharp, bony cutting blades to dismember its lunch. And here, the expectation is that the Dunkleosteus got up to be 30 feet long, which would have been up from the wall to about here. It was indeed a monster, but did not match the description of Leviathan. How about the monster turtle from the fossil record with the name Archelon? Well, he was as big as a Volkswagen, and it was a sea-going monster turtle. It could have landed on land occasionally, but did not have teeth or meet the requirements of striking fear into the heart of men. Archelon was not Leviathan. So next, let's look at the man-eating crocodile. These are the largest and most fierce of today's crocodiles. His teeth, jaws, and scales match the description for Leviathan. The saltwater crocodile is the largest and most vicious of the existing crocodiles that we know about. Let's look at the biology of the crocodilians of today. Today's alligators, crocodiles, caimans, and gharials are all related as follows. They're all in order Crocodilia. They're in the family Crocodilidae. And their subfamily 1 consists of the Alligatorini, which are the caimans and the alligators. Subfamily 2 are the Crocodilini, which are the crocodiles. Subfamily 3 are the Gavialini, which are the gharials or the gavials. So, some common genus names of species for today's alligators. Everybody probably thinks they know a little bit about alligators, crocodiles, and caimans, and because they make quite a smash when they're in the news. Well, the American alligator is genus and species name is Alligator mississippiensis. American caiman is Caiman crocodilus fuscus. The American crocodile is Crocodilus acutus. The African Nile crocodile is Crocodilus niloticus, and the saltwater crocodile is Crocodilus ferocious. Now these are representative, probably the most notable of the various kinds of crocodiles and alligators. Altogether, there have been dozens of genus and species names assigned to these reptiles in the family Crocodilidae. And here's what the gharial's name is. So let's look here a little bit at the general big picture of these reptiles. At the top we see the American crocodile, and then we see a modern gharial and a saltwater crocodile below. They're all similar but do have differences. One thing that they all have that no other reptile has is they have a 4-chambered heart. Some crocs are actual living fossils. Living fossils are fossils that are alive today that are found in the rock record, supposedly millions of years old, whereby there is absolutely or very little change between the fossil specimen and the ones we see today. And if you look at this Smithsonian photograph that I took here, the genus Crocodilus crocodile, I could find with detailed inspection literally no structural difference between the modern crocodile skeleton above and the fossil replica below. The caption on this display said that the age of the fossil crocodile was 140 million years old. So that certainly would be a description of what we would call a living fossil. The main way to tell the difference between a modern alligator and a modern crocodile is by their snouts and their teeth. So in the left picture we see a crocodile snout, and it's like a narrow cone, whereas the alligator snout is broad and flat. Also, we have differences in the crocodile. Their teeth overlap and show outside of their lips. The alligator teeth fit into sockets when the mouth is closed. Here's a look into the mouth of a crocodilian. This is a caiman, where we can see that the very large tongue is fixed to the floor of the mouth of the animal. Here is the construction of the mouth and throat that shows a design that allows for the crocodilian to eat and breathe in its land and water environment. These reptiles have huge muscles that allow for a tremendous bite. However, their muscles for opening their mouths are weak. That's why you often see these crocodile wrestlers grabbing the crocodile or the alligator mouth and being able to hold it shut. Because they don't have big muscles to open, but their muscles to close are quite strong. Here's a general internal design of crocodilians. When we get to looking at fossil evidences, we need to remember that the hard parts are a very small percentage of the reptile. Let's next take a look at what we do know about the largest modern crocodile. The average size male is, and this is a saltwater crocodile, the average size male is 17 feet long and 1,000 pounds. So that would be, this first one is 35 feet, so it would be, it's 20 feet, so it would be, what does it say on it? 25 feet. So you'd have to go back, you'd have to go shorten that by about 10 feet to get to the largest crocodiles that we've found alive today. 17 feet long, 1,000 pounds for the average, and up to 23 feet, so almost have been found. They populate brackish and freshwater regions of eastern India, Southeast Asia, and northern Australia. They're excellent swimmers and have been spotted far out at sea. They are the animal most likely to eat a human. Classic opportunistic predators, saltwater crocodiles lurk patiently beneath the surface near the water's edge, waiting for potential prey to stop for a drink of water. They will feed on anything they can get their jaws on, including water buffalo, monkeys, wild boar, and even sharks. Without warning, they explode from the water with a thrash of their powerful tails, grasp their victim, and drag it back in, holding it under until it drowns. Here are some additional facts about the saltwater crocodiles. Contrary to conventional wisdom, crocodilians not only can digest fruit, but seem to commonly and intentionally consume fruit. Crocodilians grow for their entire lifespans, and we don't know for sure how long that is, maybe up to 50 or 100 years. But indications are that the largest animals of today resulted from hybridization, that is, for example, between saltwater crocs and the Siamese croc, and advantageous early life conditions. Of course, most of them probably don't have advantageous early life conditions, so they would not be able to live for long periods of time. Number 3, the epidermal exoskeleton of crocodiles consists of oblong, horny scales arranged in transverse rows. This provides a form of armor. Science has shown that a design for armor consisting of a number of individual plates that are much harder than a soft substrate is very efficient at resisting penetration. No animal we have considered other than the crocodile is known to have anything that could be described as armor. These crocodiles match many of the description of Job 41, including leaving marks in the sand or in the mud. Here's another image of a trail of saltwater crocodiles that move through a desert location. Saltwater crocs certainly do spend some time on land. They become even more ferocious when they rise up, as Leviathan does in Job 41. But from history, we know that men have attacked and killed crocodiles. Even today, men often kill crocodiles for their skin, their meat, and for sport. What do we know about the largest fossil crocodiles from the rock record? Well, we know that they're much, much larger than saltwater crocodiles. So let's take a look at that. Fossil evidence indicates that these were pre-flood. These pre-flood crocodiles make the saltwater crocodiles look puny. Consider that it's possible that representatives of these kinds survived the flood to be seen by people at the time of Job. Remember, Job didn't live that long after the flood. Here we see a comparison of a number of giant crocodiles from the fossils in the rock record next to the saltwater crocodile at the bottom of the chart. So all of these animals here are found in the rock record as fossils. Here's the crocodile that's the largest one, the saltwater crocodile, the largest one that's alive today. And so you can see, 10 meters, that's 35 feet or so for that ones on the top. Okay, so clearly these animals could be able to rise up twice as high as today's saltwater croc. In fact, we would estimate that they could rise to be 7 feet off of the ground with their jaws. Most of the evidence available for these giant crocodiles are for a genus named Sarcosuchus, which is that one on the top, and Deinosuchus, which is the one down below, the ones I pointed with the arrows there. One other consideration is that God's description of Leviathan is for a family of giant crocs, not just a particular genus name. In other words, perhaps what Job saw was a relative of one of the Sarcosuchus or Deinosuchus or some other giant crocodile that was a somewhat different design, maybe a different genus name. If we were able to dig it up, we might have a different name for it. But the point is that these particular animals match up to a lot of the descriptions from the book of Job and Psalm 104. In this photo, we see a side-by-side comparison of the skulls of a giant pre-flood crocodile and a saltwater crocodile of today. So the small one's the saltwater, and the large one is from Sarcosuchus. A human croc hunter would be foolish to attack an animal like this with a spear or a club, don't you think? Let's take a look at the history of the discovery of Sarcosuchus. So Sarcosuchus imperator, Sarcosuchus imperator means flesh crocodile emperor. In the 1940s, French scientist de Lapeyre explored the Sahara Desert on a camel and found some giant crocodile teeth. Then in 1966, Frenchman Philippe Tacquet published a paper on a giant 5-foot-long croc skull found in Niger. In collaboration with France de Bruyne, the fossil remains were named, and they named it Sarcosuchus imperator. Then in 1993, American paleontologist Paul Sereno made plans to search for giant croc fossils in broader areas of Niger where the French had left off. In 1997, Sereno returned to Niger and, along with other fossils, found a 6-foot-long Sarcosuchus skull. Then in the fall of 2000, Sereno leads a large contingent of scientists back to Niger and to search for more super croc fossil bones. The 16th of November 2001, Sereno and others published their paper, quote, "The Giant Crocodilian-Formed Sarcosuchus from the Cretaceous of Africa," and that was in the journal Science, number 294. And then in December of 2001, Sereno published in the National Geographic magazine, the article Super Croc, pages 84 through 89. 2002, Christopher Sloan published a National Geographic layman's book called Super Croc and the Origin of Crocodiles, with an introduction by Paul Sereno. So in 2005, a paper in the Creationist journal, TJ, by Peter Booker, he wrote the article, "A New Candidate for Leviathan." So we now have the creationists joining in. Peter Booker is a creationist. He wrote in a creationist journal that he thought Sarcosuchus would be a good candidate to be considered for Leviathan. And at that time, the book written by Carl B. Whelan called Dragons of the Deep, the book that we have up here that we're going to give to the kids if they can come up to get it, and the book that Design Science has had in their stock for a long time, that book was also brought out at about the same time. So now we're having both creationists and secularists come to the thought that maybe Super Croc could be considered Leviathan. So here we have, what we're looking at here is a map. Up here in the corner is a map showing the north and west portions of the continent of Africa. And this is Niger, and then this is an expansion of this dark color here of where they found the Super Croc fossil finds in that country. And here's a map with more details, shows more detail about it where the site was. And here's an aerial photo of what the area of Sarcosuchus finds look like. Notice this is a desert, and a lot of Africa is desert, but what you'll find in these deserts is lots of fossils of marine reptiles, other marine animals of all sorts, which tells us at one time or another this was not a desert. The caption on this photo reads, quote, "Fossils, 20 tons in all, were sealed in protective plaster and laid in camp to await shipment to the United States." So this is in this particular photo, we have a nose-to-nose. There's a nose-to-nose. We've got one croc headed toward the left, one croc skull headed toward the right. And as you can see, as with many fossils, they're not all totally complete, and a lot of guesswork is done as to how big they are and exactly what you have. But that's typical with most fossils from the global flood. Here's a photo of a set of jaws that they left in situ there, and they left them there because they wanted to give people the opportunity to have tourists be able to take a look at them as they traveled out in the desert. One of the most amazing things about the finds of Sarcosuchus was the design and size of his protective osteoderms, or scutes. This is an actual photo of a scute that is 3 inches wide by 5 inches long. Here's a replica of a Sarcosuchus scute that has provided the armor for the animal. This scute is 6 inches square by 1.5 inches thick. Some fossil Sarcosuchus scutes were up to 12 inches long. And I give you those dimensions because here's the photo of a regular crocodile, living crocodile fossil scute. And I've been looking at these for 20 years, and this is the largest one I'm aware of, and it's 2 inches square. So these giant crocodile scutes were massive compared to what we find in the crocodilians of today. Here's a replica Sarcosuchus tooth. The largest croc teeth that I'm aware of from today's animals are about the size of my little tiny pinky here. In his science paper that I mentioned earlier, Serino included this illustration. It shows what portion of the complete Sarcosuchus they were able to collect in Niger. Serino estimates that they had altogether about 50% of the bones of the reptile. Now the trunk scoot marked E is about 4 inches wide by 12 inches long. So these are some, these dashed lines show where the expanded drawing where they got that particular part from, and these are other parts. These are vertebrae up here, and the dashed line shows where they got that. And of course, this is a 6 foot long skull, showing a man laying there, showing that it's as long as a man. In the rock record, fossil teeth and skulls are always among the most complete components that remain because they're hard and easier for the fossil process to have them survive. For Sarcosuchus sites, often the skull and teeth are the only parts found. And so here this is a picture of 3 views of the same skull. Here's a side view, top view, bottom view, and these are some pictures of the cross section of these teeth. Now, what I want to remind you is the hard parts of vertebrate animal fossils comprise at most 15% of the animal. So as most paleontologists spend their time coming up with ideas about what fossils look like when they were alive based on 15% of the evidence. The soft parts are seldom preserved, and no soft parts for these giant crocodilians have been reported found so far. Much about the anatomy of the rest of the animals is inferred from the morphology of existing modern similar crocodilians. I would say that the animals most often used for this are the alligator and the saltwater crocodile. So I'm going to be showing you some pictures of people's reconstructions of what they thought Sarcosuchus looked like now. But what you have to know is that they used very little of the skeleton, and mostly they used how they know that the common alligator and saltwater crocodile have their mate. And so Sarcosuchus in the biblical worldview was buried rapidly during the global flood and found later in the rock record in fossils. And the skeletal reconstruction that we see here, they came up with Sarcosuchus being 40 feet long. It's 50 feet there, so that means 10 feet back from that cone, from the wall to here. That's how long Sarcosuchus was estimated to be. Now here's one attempt at a fleshed out Sarcosuchus reconstruction in prone position. Imagine yourself facing one of these animals rising up 6 or 7 feet high with its mouth wide open, ready to take you in one bite. This replica rendition has been seen online for 2 decades, and I'm not sure where exactly. I think it was in Africa that was put together. Here is a Sarcosuchus reconstruction that was completed in 2024 that is the latest interpretation of how that giant crocodile looked in real life. And here's an artist's rendition of what Sarcosuchus may have looked as a 40-foot-long crocodile. Some secular paleontologists have the opinion that Sarcosuchus ate dinosaurs. Here's an artist's rendering of Sarcosuchus clamping down on some unfortunate victim. And notice too that Sarcosuchus had a large, round, bowl-shaped protrusion on its snout that is not present in the crocodiles of today. Could that hold possible answers for how Leviathan could shoot flame and smoke from its nose and mouth? So what we're talking about is today's crocodiles, the largest, they do not have this big protrusion like Sarcosuchus had. Here's a fact summary for the giant crocodile Sarcosuchus. Length up to 40 feet, weight up to 10 tons, 20,000 pounds. Location of the fossils, the Sahara Desert of Africa and the Bahia Basin of Brazil. Jaw length 6 feet, teeth 100 teeth up to 6 inches long. Bony armor, plate scoots head to tail up to 12 inches long. Snout round, bowl-shaped protrusion on it. After the break, we're going to take a look at another giant fossil crocodile called Deinosuchus, But before we break for that, let's take a final look here at Spinosaurus, the dinosaur that has been suggested to be Leviathan. This slide illustrates in white the bones that have been found, and so we can see that knowledge of it is very incomplete. Lots of teeth have been found in Morocco, but no evidence of scutes. When I say lots of teeth, I mean thousands upon thousands of teeth of Spinosaurus. I have sold hundreds of these teeth myself when people have come to various displays, because I was able to buy them for $10 or $15 a piece. That shows how many there are. But other than the teeth, there's not a lot of Spinosaurus that we've found in Morocco, in the Morocco mountains. Here's one skeletal reconstruction of Spinosaurus with its crocodile-like head and its 6-foot tail. No, I do not think that Spinosaurus matches well with the Job 41 description, at least not as well as the giant crocodiles. Remember, no scutes have been found with Spinosaurus fossils, so it would certainly have no problem being penetrated by a spear. Okay, so let's take a break now, and we'll come back after the break. Mark's going to come up, and I'm going to take a break, and Mark's going to come up and after the break and give you my treasures report. And then we'll start back up after that and finish talking about Deinosuchus and even give you some opinions about Behemoth. All right, so we're halfway done.
Yes, thank you very much, J.D. So let's take a break till 10:20. Ready to resume our talk? Good. Thank you, J.D.
Okay, there's the slide back up. Welcome back to the talk. A new evaluation of biblical and scientific evidence for Leviathan. Here's another replica of the Sarcosuchus skull, so that covers our look at Sarcosuchus as Leviathan. As I mentioned, we're going to take a look at Deinosuchus next. From the fossil record, we know that crocodiles lived pre-flood and that make today's saltwater crocodiles look like babies. The skull of this giant Deinosuchus fossil croc was much larger than the common croc of today. And when replica skulls of Sarcosuchus and Deinosuchus are placed side by side, it's easy to see that they're similar. The main difference is that Sarcosuchus has a narrower snout than does Deinosuchus. And as we did with Sarcosuchus, next let's look at the history of the discovery of Deinosuchus. Deinosuchus hatcheri and Deinosuchus riograndensis, which means terrible crocodile. So now I went through that history of how they had discovered Sarcosuchus. Now let's look at Deinosuchus. In 1909, Deinosuchus hatcheri found in Fergus County, Montana. Bones consisted of 2 vertebrae, a pubis, 1 atlantal rib, 1 dorsal rib, numerous osteoderms, and several hundred fragments of unidentifiable bones. Some of the original bones first described here have been lost. No skull components were found. The hatcheri species designation was later renamed riograndensis. So people asked me at the break, what's a scute? Well, scutes are also called osteoderms. They are the hard as a bone thing that was used as a sort of a protective armor for the backs of these animals. Like a scale, but thicker and harder. So even though Deinosuchus means terrible crocodile in Greek, some secular paleontologists believe it's more like an alligator than a crocodile. Those osteoderms are also called scutes, I know that seems to be a little confusing for people, but that's what they are. They're called either osteoderms or scutes, and they're just a hard rock, or a bone-hard piece, and I'll show you some more pictures of them. So Deinosuchus was found in America. Sarcosuchus was found in Africa. The left image in this slide is of the main vertebral parts found, and the scutes are seen in the right-hand image. So these are vertebrae components, and these are various scutes. Excuse me. And I want to remind you that the fact that the hard parts of vertebrate animal fossils comprise at most 15% of animal. The soft parts are seldom preserved. No soft parts for these giant crocodilians have been reported found. Much about the anatomy of the rest of the animals is inferred from the morphology of existing modern similar crocodilians. And so we're going to look into the Deinosuchus a little deeper here. Various digs from 1954 to 1988, Deinosuchus found in and around Big Bend National Park in southwest Texas. These bones, the hatchery ones, and some others were systematically reviewed in 2020 in a paper in the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology by Adam Cassetti and Christopher Brocu. And the name of their article was A Systematic Review of the Giant Alligatoroid Deinosuchus and its implications for the relationships of crocodilia, unquote. So this study in 2020 looked at a lot of Deinosuchus bones. We will look at only those I think are of consequence in our evaluation of Deinosuchus as a Leviathan candidate. All the bones we will look at were either first from Montana or later from Texas. The estimates I have seen say Deinosuchus grew to be up to 10.5 meters long. That's about 35 feet, so that's from the wall to this cone here. This is a photo of Deinosuchus mandible parts and teeth for this species Rio Grandensis. The teeth, so up here you see the teeth. Those are 2.5 inches long. And these are different component parts. Here's some more teeth components. These are component parts of the mandible, or the part of the jaw. This is a photo of the Deinosuchus skull, top to the left and the bottom to the right. That component is 55 inches. Please notice that this is that the condition of these things is not what you call super great. Lots of parts are missing, and it's pretty fragile, you can tell. This is the top, and that's the bottom of the skull. 55 inches long. And this is a photo of the Deinosuchus, the bottom part of the jaw, the bottom part of the jaw here. The one side, top view, the other side. And that part, the 58 inches long, 8 inches high. Now, this is these are all the Brochu and his buddy. They found every part that they could find in any museum, anywhere in Montana or in Texas, anybody that had found anything, and they looked at them all, they studied them all. And so they laid them all out and took pictures of them all because they wanted to make sure they had a complete inventory of everything that was known about the skeleton of Deinosuchus. And here are some postcranial bones. These are the bones to the back of the skull. The skull, the largest scutes are down here. These are the scutes here. Scoot mark number I is 5 inches in maximum dimension. So notice that these scutes are not quite as big as the Sarcosuchus scutes were that have been found. So in the fall of 2023, the issue of Creation Research Society Quarterly, volume 60, number 2, creationists Brian Thomas and Daniel Biddle submitted a paper with the title, quote, Insight into Job's Theology from a New Identification for Leviathan, unquote. In this paper, they identified Deinosuchus as a better candidate for Leviathan than his Sarcosuchus. There were two main reasons for their opinion. Number one, Sarcosuchus, with its narrow snout and tail design, would not be able to perform the so-called death roll that crocodilians perform to subdue and dismember large prey, while Deinosuchus would be able to do so, they assumed. This is based totally on theoretical assumptions regarding the two animals' body component dimensions and ratios. The second reason is that Cosetti and the Brochu study found that Deinosuchus had additional holes in its snout forward to its nostrils that Thomas and Biddle submitted might hold the key to how Leviathan could snort fire and smoke. So here we see figure 13 from Cosetti and Brochu that show the fenestrae. They call those, this is called a fenestrae here, or that's a hole in the left premaxilli. The settlers have no idea what the function of that hole is. Thus, the proposal from Thomas and Biddle, the creationists, was that that it might have something to do with the smoke and the fire. Item B is 13 inches maximum dimension, and it was 13 inches wide by 14 inches high, so that's how big that is. The holes are about 5 inches wide. That you see, that's hole, a 5-inch hole and 5.5-inch hole. This is a life-size bronze replica of Deinosuchus skull at the main room of the Fossil Discovery exhibit at Big Bend National Park in Texas, which is near to where many of the Rio Grandensis fossils were found. This replica shows the fenestrae at the front of the snout of the skull. And then, so there's that hole. Now the nostrils are back in here. You can't really see them in this picture. So the arrow's pointing at these fenestrae, or these holes that the creationists are concerned with. So artists using the skeletal fossil bones retrieved from the rock record used their knowledge of the anatomy of the modern crocodiles to come to a fleshed out image of Deinosuchus as seen here. So how did they come up with this? Well, they have the 15% of the animal here, and then they know what regular today crocodilians look like, so they assume that its muscular would look something like this, and therefore, using that information, they artistically come up with what they think the animal might have looked like, all put together. Once a few bones and teeth are recovered, then the artists are brought to provide all kinds of renderings of what the animal may have looked like, such as this picture here. And here's an artistic rendering where one paleontologist had the idea that Deinosuchus used its back teeth of its jaws to crush the shells of large turtles. And here's a Deinosuchus complete skeleton you can buy. It's a replica. I think it's 20 to 40 grand, somewhere in there. It does not show the fenestrae at the tip of its snout. I don't know why they didn't put that in there, but they didn't. And what you need to know is that they had a certain number of the bones. You saw all those pictures I showed of all the bones that those two guys had accumulated. And they took those bones, and then they took I think it was about a 10-foot long modern alligator, and they dissected that modern alligator, and they used the modern alligator to help them determine where they were going to put all the skeletal components. And that's how they came up with that replica there. It was from the bones that the two paleontologists had written a paper on, plus dissecting a 10-foot long alligator, a modern alligator. So, you can also buy for about $7,000 to $8,000. You can buy this replica online of the Deinosuchus skull, but it doesn't have the fenestrae in it either. So here's where we are in this evaluation. Land animal, no. Whale, no. Sea monster, no. Marine reptile, no. Sea dragon, no. Giant crocodile, that's the best bet. Now, how about the problem of the smoke from a Leviathan? Consider God's creation of fireflies and the bombardier beetle. Many of you are probably pretty familiar with the bombardier beetle, But for those who may not be familiar, here's a photo of one of these unassuming little insects. They're no bigger than your thumbnail. They're not big. And here's how they're designed. They're designed so that they have two components separated here, hydroquinone, and then in this container they have hydrogen peroxide, and then they're able to, when they are threatened by something wants to eat them or smash them or something, they can combine these in an explosion chamber, and explosive gas at 212 degrees Fahrenheit comes shooting out. Pretty amazing, huh? And here's a picture of one. They can direct. They have the ability to direct that gas. That's a photo of one of those beetles in action. And so if God can design the bombardier beetle with this so very unlikely capability, he certainly could do similar design for Leviathan to allow for shooting flashes of light, sparks of fire, and smoke out of its nose and fire out of its mouth. That is what a believer in God's word would come to that conclusion. The question of how did the giant pre-flood crocodiles get so large has been recently studied by creationist Dr. Jake Hebert from ICR, and he's published his findings in a couple of places. He first published it in Creation Research Society Quarterly, which you see the cover of the magazine up there. That was the volume 61 in 2025, pages 172 to 188. And the title of his article was, or his paper was, "The fossil crocodilians grew larger and lived longer than extant crocodilians." Here's some segments from the Hebert abstract. Quote, "Whatever factor or factors enabled extreme human longevity in the pre- and immediate post-flood worlds likely also affected the animal kingdom. Thus, direct or indirect evidence for greater past animal longevity is also de facto evidence for greater past human longevity. The field of skeletochronology is making it possible to deduce information about the ontological growth trajectories of giant fossil crocodilians such as Deinosuchus riograndensis and Sarcosuchus imperator. Their growth curves indicate that these crocodilians grew for at least 50 to 60 years, a duration significantly greater than the total typical 30-year lifespan of extant crocodilians. Given the evidence from longevity studies linking both larger adults' body sizes and greater ages at maturation to greater longevity, the large adult body sizes of Deinosuchus and Sarcosuchus and their prolonged maturation intervals are indirect evidence of lifespans greater than extant crocodilians." So the whole point of his idea, what he's trying to say here is that by studying what we've learned about these giant crocodiles and using information from that gives us ideas about how they got so big, having to do with how long they lived, we can take some of that information and transpose it across to maybe understand why humans were able to live so long, prior to the flood. So the detail of the paper explains how studies of large bones and especially scoot measurements can provide the growth curve evidence stated. So again, the scoots are a key to gaining knowledge about the large animals. Scoots, osteoderms, they're key in a number of reasons. Here's one summary growth curve that's from Hebert's paper in volume 61 of the Creation Research Society Quarterly. And basically it's showing here typical alligator. These little dots are data dates for information that they have. And so they have this idea that if you have age versus length, that these give us some idea. And you see with the Deinosuchus how much longer it grew over a period of about the same amount of time that alligators really haven't been. According to their data, the alligator stopped at 30 years, but if they lived to be 60, they would only be 4 meters instead of 9 or 10 meters. Okay, so what I want to remind you is that if you've been paying any attention to the Design Science newsletter, you know that next month, January the 3rd Saturday in January, Dr. Jake Hebert will be here, and he's scheduled to speak on this topic about what did we learn from these giant extinct alligators, fossil alligators, that helps us maybe understand better how humans could have lived to be 900 years long, or many hundreds of years long. So I'm not going to take any more of his thunder. So just plan to come and listen to Dr. Hebert, and understand he's going to be speaking at a number of places, but he's going to be talking specifically at DSA about this research that he's been doing. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with some conclusions now. Leviathan is not a land animal, not a whale, not a sea monster, not a marine reptile, not a sea dragon, most likely a giant crocodile. And I want to repeat this point 14 from Job 41. Leviathan can only be controlled by his creator, and Leviathan was created to remind men of God's sovereignty and to humble them before his creation. So, here's what I did is that I looked at 14 different characteristics for Leviathan as described, biblical descriptors here. There are 7 on this slide. There's going to be some more on the next slide. And for number 1, that it was water and seaworthy, and we're going to compare Sarcosuchus to Deinosuchus. Let's see which one gets the most points. Okay, so they're all the same down to here, but due to that description that Biddle and Brian came up with, I'm going to give Sarcosuchus a lower point on this nose and jaws things because they don't have those fenestrae. Sarcosuchus don't show that, so I give Deinosuchus more points there. But tough hide and skin, I'm going to give Sarcosuchus a high 10 because the Deinosuchus scutes are not as robust. And so I give them a lower points on scales, hard and jagged undersides. Well, they do make marks when they go on land, but I don't know if it would be really good to say that they're hard and jagged underside because the hard parts are on the tops of their bodies. Okay, so let's look at the rest of the chart. So they all rank the same so far as its limbs are strong and graceful. They can swim very well. Fearsome teeth. Sarcosuchus' teeth were bigger than Deinosuchus, so I'm going to give them some more points there. Snorting light and smoke. Oh, I don't know we have enough information to give either of them 10s, but I'm going to give Deinosuchus a couple more points than Sarcosuchus because of the fenestrae. Can rise up. Yeah, they both get 10 there. Men should be humbled by their God. They all get 10 there. And then here's the final analysis. Total points for Sarcosuchus, 116. Deinosuchus loses by 1 point. Sarcosuchus is my winner. You can put that in your little takeaway card. Okay, and just for the heck of it, I did a similar analysis for Behemoth. For Behemoth, let's see, I don't know if I even told you what the descriptors were there. Yeah, here they are. So here are the descriptors for Behemoth. Plant eater, power, blah, 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 here, tree-like seer, and all that sort of thing. And so the only thing that I didn't give Behemoth a 10 for was the water environment because I think maybe the sauropod-type dinosaurs did spend time in the water, but I don't think they were what we would call really lovers of the water. I think that they were land animals like all the other dinosaurs. So I didn't give them a 10 there. So Behemoth is Job 40. Leviathan was Job 41. And so here's I showed you what my analysis was for Leviathan. I say Sarcosuchus is a winner, but they're both above 8 out of 10. Behemoth I gave 9.63. Almost 10. So, take out your takeaway cards now. We'll see if we can. How many of you got anything right? Okay, so there are a total of 37 descriptive verses for the animal called Leviathan in Job 41 and Psalm 104. From the Bible's description, it seems clear that Leviathan was real and not mythical. The blue whale is longer than a school bus by far. After investigating 5 suggested candidates for Leviathan, a large crocodile seems to be the best remaining candidate. The average saltwater crocodile is 17 feet long, weighs about 1,000 pounds. The Sarcosuchus extinct giant crocodile was first found fossilized in what country? The Deinosuchus giant crocodile was found fossilized in what state? And the bombardier beetle is an example of a life form that is able to manufacture boiling hot explosive gas to fend off predators. In the final analysis, J.D. says Sarcosuchus was the most likely Leviathan.
Wait, put that back. I gotta check my answers. Thank you.
Was that, I went through that too fast, huh? Okay, so previously we had said that we would take a little short break now, but I don't think we need to take much of a break before we do Q&A. I saw some kids up here. Scurry up here and grab either a book or a model, and then we'll go to Q&A as soon as you get them. Got any kids that want either a model or a book? If you consider yourself a kid, come up and get one.
Kids are 4 to 15, is that right?
Well, yeah, but it looks like we're going to have plenty we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so and there's a lot more than that up there. So you can have one or the other, either a book or a modeled Sarcosuchus there. Whatever you like. Just grab whatever you like, but one or the other. Well, we thank you kids a lot for coming. I hope you got something out of this. And ask your friends and other young people you interact with to come to Design Science. So we've got lots of information there for you. All right, so we can do the Q&A now.
Okay, and if you